The following program is a podcast1.com production.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
That's why I'm hot-blooded. Check it and see. I got a fever of 103. Come on, baby, do you do more than dance?
Senate race in Alabama possibly about to get uglier. Candidate Roy Moore standing defiant in the face of growing calls from his own party to step aside.
I've been investigated more than any other person in this country. To think that grown women would wait 40 years to come right before an election to bring charges is absolutely unbelievable.
Why is it difficult for anybody at this point to do what some of these right-thinking Republicans have done and just say, we got to wash our hands of the pedophile here, or the accused pedophile, and figure out some way forward?
They could back the Democratic candidate, who from everybody's reporting is a guy of integrity, and they could put party aside and back the Democratic candidate against the pedophile.
You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. We'll dig into this Roy Moore scandal, the burgeoning fight within the Republican Party about DACA and what's going to happen to that, and Donald Trump in the Philippines discussing our relationship with Duterte, who, of course, himself has all sorts of issues with human rights violations. And Donald Trump, by all accounts, has had an incredible trip to Asia, representing our country well, and talk about defiant. He's defiant on trade. We'll play some of that for you. Everyone was arguing that Donald Trump was giving up the store on trade with China until he actually gave a phenomenal speech last week in Vietnam. So he leaves China after all the pageantry. He goes to Vietnam and says, guess what? We're nobody's patsy. We're not going to do this anymore. That was fantastic. And the Roy Moore allegations continue, of course, to be a gift to the Democrats and a cloud hanging over the GOP. There's no doubt about it. Hannity had Roy Moore on his radio show. And for all of you who've been under a rock over the past week, you don't know what I'm talking about. This is the fact that Roy Moore, who is that former chief judge of the Alabama Supreme Court, who was removed twice from office as defiant on the Ten Commandments monument removal issue, and he was removed from office, became something of a folk hero within Alabama. He was part of that scrum of candidates who ran for Jeff Sessions' seat in that special election. I actually endorsed Mo Brooks, who was and is phenomenal on immigration and all these other issues. He made a mistake in not endorsing Trump or being very kind of anti-Trump during the primary, but then he screwed his head on straight after Donald Trump won the nomination. But nevertheless, he was not kind to Donald Trump, Mo Brooks, during the primary. However, he's really good on all the issues. So that's why I supported Mo Brooks. But Mo Brooks didn't make the runoff, and Mitch McConnell and the gang got involved in supporting the interim senator, Luther Strange. And they got Donald Trump to support Luther Strange. You know what I say? Thank God Donald Trump actually didn't support Roy Moore now. Imagine if he had gotten behind Roy Moore now. That would have just thrown this. Again, I'm not talking about whether the allegations are fair or not fair. I think any man or any woman, frankly, in the workplace who is up for some big promotion later on in life and finds out 38 years later you're accused of something, you can never disprove it. Really hard to disprove it, at least. And you can't prove it. Can't prove it, can't disprove it, but there you have it. That's the way politics is. Is it fair? No. Is it unfair? Yeah. There's not really a legal question probably involved, unless apparently she wants to go to the authorities all these years later. There is no statute of limitations for crimes of this sort against children. And in fact, being involved with a 14-year-old is, if these allegations are true, is absolutely reprehensible and criminal. It is a criminal violation because it amounts to the assault of a child, even if it's you can't say even if it's consensual, because someone under the age of 16 cannot give consent legally. This is when I'm really glad I'm a lawyer, too, by the way. I'm so glad I'm a lawyer. I say that a lot, but I'm really glad I'm a lawyer. Because I see, with legal training and having practiced law, you do see the angles. You see the angle for the women coming forward, the possible angles. And ditto, you see the angles on the political side. I have a way of kind of looking at it from the both left and the right, because there are a lot of establishment Republicans who are happy to declare Roy Moore fini, dead, gone politically. And it gives them an opportunity to say, see, we were right. The guy should never have been in the runoff. He should never have been the nominee. There were rumors about this guy floating around for years that he has a issue with women. I don't think it was necessarily young women, but I've heard people say that. I had never heard anything about him, but I'm not in Alabama. But it is interesting that if Mitch McConnell hadn't gotten involved in this, someone like a Mo Brooks could very well have been in that runoff and might have actually had a pretty good chance. I mean, the establishment should have never gotten involved in this in the first place. Let the people of Alabama figure it out for themselves. And now you see, the sort of chickens coming home to roost. There are a lot of people in Alabama who see this as another Washington attempt, in this case the Washington Post attempt, to run their state and to determine who should be their senator. And they don't like that. The South has a view, I think, of the Northeast and Northerners, not because of slavery or anything, but they have a view that you think we're all stupid and backwater and dumb. We're not dumb. We know what we're doing. So stay out. If we decide we're not going to go with Roy Moore, we won't go. We'll elect Doug Jones, who's for partial birth abortion. He's for aborting children right up to the time when they're out of the womb, coming out of the womb. That's what he's for. So I guess you pick your poison depending on what you believe. Doug Jones believes in infanticide. The man is a nightmare on all his political views. He no more represents the core of the Alabama voter than someone like a Barney Frank would have. Okay, so you might as well elect someone like Barney Frank or Chuck Schumer to be senator from Alabama if you're going to elect this guy Doug Jones. On the other hand, got these late in the game allegations against Roy Moore, and I frankly don't know why he went on Hannity's radio show, because I frankly thought he did himself no good and perhaps hurt his case, as I said on Friday on Fox, hurt his case by what he said. Now, we're going to play kind of a lengthy clip here. We want to play the whole thing, 2 clips, I guess. But listen very closely. I know a lot of people at the end of the week, you're off doing other things, so you might not have seen this or heard it. Hannity replayed it on his TV show. But this was Roy Moore and asked tough questions by Hannity in an extended interview. Let's listen.
Would it be unusual for you as a 32-year-old guy to have dated a woman as young as 17? That would be a 15-year difference, or a girl 18. Do you remember dating girls that young at that time?
Not generally, no. If I did, I'm not going to dispute anything, but I don't remember anything like that.
But you don't specifically remember having any girlfriend that was in her late teens even at that time?
No, I don't remember that, and I don't remember ever dating any girl without the permission of her mother.
Okay. Does any of that sound odd to you? As a grown man, as a 31 or 32-year-old man, you're in a situation where you have to ask a mother's approval? Of course, implicit in that is that you're dating teenagers. And he really didn't deny dating teenagers. And again, I say this at the same time we know lots of people date teenagers and are not only not criticized for it, they're celebrated for it. Bill Maher, Jerry Seinfeld, Woody Allen, go down the list. But we as conservatives kind of think that's gross. If a 31 or 32-year-old man tried to date my daughter at age 17 or 18, they'd have to pick him up at the bottom of a staircase. Okay? That's how that would end with him. Okay? It wouldn't be happening. Never. So, but a friend of mine from Alabama messaged me, says, you don't seem to understand the culture in 1979. A guy who's an assistant district attorney, went to West Point, handsome, has an incredible persona. And where he's from, in that county where he's from, there are a lot of mothers who would be like, this is a dream. This is a dream man for my daughter. He's established. He's very smart, extremely accomplished. He's a patriot, comes from a good family. So that's just the way it was for a lot of families. Maybe not all, but for a lot. Like for us looking at this, we're like, you got to be kidding me. But of course, this happens all the time in society today. I'm not talking the 16, 14. I'm talking about 17, 18-year-olds. I don't think it makes it right. But that is the context in which he was apparently dating people 17 and 18. He had to ask their mother's permission. Here's a clue. If you have to ask the mother's permission to date and you're a 31-year-old man, you're doing something wrong. Now, again, late in the game hit, don't know about these women. They're not subjecting themselves to any questioning. Do you notice they just talked to the Washington Post? I bet there will be something else that comes out in the next couple of weeks, I imagine. I don't think this is going to be it. But here's my view. If you're going to make these allegations 38, 39 years later, you can't just give a cutie interview with the Washington Post and then run away. Just like Roy Moore has got to subject himself to more questioning. But did you think that Roy Moore answered? Did that really make you feel all good about Roy Moore?
Would it be normal behavior back in those days for you to date a girl that's 17 or 18?
No, not normal.
If my daughter is 17, my daughter's 16 years old. If she's 17 or 18, I don't want her dating a 32-year-old.
I wouldn't either.
And you can say unequivocally you never dated anybody that was in their late teens like that when you were 32?
It would have been out of my customary behavior. That's right.
That's not a good answer. You know what I do if I'm the prosecutor in this case? We rest our case. I just sit down at that point. And then I bring on two people who say, two people in their 80s who say, well, yes, he did, in fact, date my daughter who was 17, 18. It was very customary for him. But see, this interview did not help him at all. Why did he do this interview? Don't do an interview if your answers aren't good. It wasn't. No. Can I just play that answer, James? You got to keep playing this stuff so people understand why I find this answer to be weird. Now, was it customary for you to date people who were 17 or 18 years of age?
It would have been out of my customary behavior. That's right.
If I never dated someone who was 17 or 18 when I was 31, I would be like, are you kidding me? Never, ever, ever. Or I would say, if it was true, yeah, but 18 years old is, by the way, an adult in Alabama, and frankly, 17 years old, you can date. There's no crime in dating a 17 or 18 or even a 16-year-old, believe it or not, back then. I don't know if the laws changed, but back then, there was no problem. But I wouldn't answer like that. Now, maybe he's just nervous. Maybe he's... And I know he feels like it's really unfair. And politics is unfair. Let me just say it. Look what they're doing to Trump. Look at what they're doing to this man. And sometimes Trump steps in it. I mean, he shouldn't have had that conversation with Putin and said, oh, well, I believe Putin. That wasn't at all smart to say. So but they're being unfair given the fact that he's had so much success, given the fact that he has been a incredible force for good in our economy, the judges he's put forward. So they're being unfair to Trump. Yeah, that's politics. Unfair. Look at the junk they write about yours truly. I mean, it's just par for the course. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they wrote Laura has 7 kids living in other countries. You know, I mean, at this point, they would say anything about me. So I'd be like, okay, I don't even care. At this point, I don't even care what they write. It doesn't even bother me. So that's where we are. 855-40-LAURA. I want to hear from Alabamans. I played a montage on TV Friday night from this show where we put together all the calls. I think we had to cut it down because it was too long, but we didn't get one call from Alabama saying Roy Moore should step aside. By the way, if he steps aside, his name is still on the ballot. We discovered that the governor can delay the vote, giving them time, and there's a lot of technicalities that I discovered in my reporting on this, but they can delay the vote. The question is, if they delay the vote, can they redo the ballots? There's some fuzziness on that question. But she can delay the vote, but she said she wants the White House to okay that. I don't understand why the White House is to okay that. You can do it yourself. 855-40-LAURA. And Roy Moore is threatening to sue the Washington Post. He's threatening to sue them. Oh, I'd like to see that lawsuit. Remember, you get discovery. When you sue, you get discovery. So you can sue, but I'm not sure that's going to help anything right now. 855-40-LAURA. We'll take a break. Your reaction as the issue of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA amnesty, is up for grabs over the next 2 weeks, meaning we have an opportunity to really get some concessions from the left. Will that happen? A lot more coming up. Don't go away.
Don't forget to remember.
Thanks to my wonderful sponsors and your support, I'm glad to say that we can provide this podcast at no cost to you at all. As a loyal listener of my program, please consider testing our sponsors because they're the ones who actually cover the cost to produce this daily show. So if you're a dog lover like I am, how about giving your dog, your best friend, a fresh, healthy, and nutritious diet? When dogs eat well, they live longer and happier lives. I'm here to tell you about NomNomNow.com, which cooks the world's best dog food. It's made fresh in the USA and delivered right to your door every week. Nom Nom Now's customized recipes cook fresh in our kitchen, delivering healthy nutrition you can actually see. Switch to Nom Nom Now and your dog will have more energy, a shinier, softer coat, and a longer, better life. Nom Nom Now really is the best food for your best friend. And right now you can save 50% on your first 2 orders of fresh, healthy dog food when you use my code Laura at NomNomNow.com. That's code Laura and save 50% on your first 2 orders. NomNom now.com. And code word LAURA. All right, let's go to Susan in Alabama on line 4. I want to hear from our Alabamans. Is it Alabamian? I should know that. Or Alabamans. Susan, what's my problem? Which one is it?
Alabamians.
Got it.
Alabamian.
Go ahead, girl.
Yeah, my point is just that the local news is responding with pictures now of people when they were 14 or posting Twitter comments of people and saying, you know, hashtag, this is what I was thinking about when I was 14, and this is a picture of me when I was 14. And it's just a hit piece, and it's just apparent to me of what they're trying to do. That, you know, they're trying to sway my vote, just like Washington Post is trying to sway my vote, and they're not going to sway my vote. I initially was for Mo Brooks, because I'm from North Alabama.
Yeah, you're like me. I was from Mo. Mo was my guy.
Right. But anyway, so South Alabama wanted Roy Moore, and I'm familiar with Roy Moore. All
right, you're going to vote for him, yes or no? We're out of time. You're going to vote for him, yes or no? Okay, another person's mind not changed. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Coming up, we're going to talk to this very cool professor of legal history. Is going to tell us a lot about what's happening with this current mess involving Moore and how this might play out politically. Heather in Florida, line 3. Heather.
Hi, I just wanted to say that we will absolutely continue to support Roy Moore. It's very customary in the South, in Alabama, Texas, Mississippi, to ask a parent's permission to court their daughter. That's a Southern thing, so it's not going to sway my vote at all. My daughter's at University of Southern Alabama. We're very proud. She's 22 years old. She and her sorority girls are voting for him, and we will not let this go on that way.
That is amazing. Wow. See, I think people smell a rat here. Even if they don't like Roy Moore, there are a lot of people, I don't really like him that much, but this can happen to anybody. And I'll tell you, no man I know is like excited about employing women now with this, you know, with this 30 years later thing. It's hard. And men who do this should be thrown out of any company, and women have to be bold enough and strong enough to complain at the time, especially adult women, of course.
But it's true. There are investigations going on. In the next few days, there will be revelations about the motivations and the content of this article. They will be brought to the public.
These stories are all we're ever going to have. 4 women with nothing to gain and everything to lose, telling their story in the Washington Post attached to their name. That's it, people. Consistent at best, every breath.
that Nicole Wallace? That's it. They have nothing. Well, I think that's a bit of a stretch to say women who live in obscurity and not out of the public eye have nothing to gain and everything to lose. I mean, I guess maybe, but you could also say it the opposite. I don't know if there's any were there financial payments. Will there be if she gives an interview to TMZ or some other outlet? I don't know. Yes, maybe. I mean, I think that's a big leap. By the way, a lot of you are messaging me after hearing the pedophilia comments all over the media all weekend long. Now, members of the media who say that, perhaps they should just go to Webster's Merriam Dictionary. Because while we all find it repugnant and potentially criminal for this type of conduct to be engaged in fact, criminal, pedophilia is, usually a psychiatric disorder where adult or older adolescent experience an exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. That's typically 10, 11, and boys at 11 or 12, girls at 10 or 11. So freakish behavior is freakish behavior, and this is not pedophilia. It's the other word, meliophilia, whatever the other description for post-pubescent, but under the age of 18. Just to be very technically correct, I know they want to rush to say all these things, but you at least when you're going to criticize Roy Moore and judge him guilty, get the terminology correct. Meliophilia, what is it called, James? When it's post-pubescent, under the age of 18. It's not pedophilia. It's something else. It's another terminology, but I can't look it up and talk at the same time. So Stephen Presser is a professor of legal history, and he's a former professor at Northwestern University, the Pritzker School of Law, and he joins us now. Professor, great to talk to you. How you doing?
It's a treat to be with you, Laura.
Now speak up so we can hear you. We need to hear everything that you're saying. It's hebephilia, I think. Hebephilia. Okay, I just found it while I was speaking. So hebephilia is the correct description of this disorder, just to be perfectly correct. Professor, I want to get into this. We're going to talk about the Weinstein, the Louis C.K. deal. But what about these types of charges decades and decades later on the cusp of a very important and contentious election in a political climate like today? How do we think through this?
Well, it's hard not to worry when you have charges like this that are so old and are almost impossible to disprove. There seems to be a pattern. We saw this with Clarence Thomas. The Anita Hill matter was raised at the last moment. And as I said in a piece that I recently published, this is radioactive stuff. It's like a nuclear option for news. And I think that when you're publishing charges like this that are virtually 40 years old, you might really want to exercise some restraint before you do that. What I think we're witnessing is that the press doesn't seem to have that restraint anymore. I think with the incredible rights that we give our media ought to come some responsibility, and I just don't think we see that these days.
Well, they're convicting him of a crime without, of course, being able to confirm anything, but on the basis of a Washington Post piece. And the Washington Post piece fallout has continued. The mother of Lee Korfman, who's the woman who said that Roy Moore engaged in this conduct with her when she was 14, the mother's name is, her last name was Nancy Wells. She's 71. Breitbart got in touch with her on Sunday or Saturday and said that her daughter would not have come forward if it weren't for the Washington Post reporters' alleged actions. and the Washington Post convinced the daughter to give them an interview. She did not go to them. They called her. They tried to convince her to do it, the reporter asked. Yes, replied Wells matter-of-factly. Wells was asked about Korfman's motivations for going public, and she said it wasn't done for politics. It was done for personal reasons, and it wouldn't have been done if the reporters hadn't contacted my daughter. So it looks like there was some pressure brought to bear on Lee Korfman. However, if the allegations are true, again, which we can't prove or disprove, I guess that's beside the fact.
Well, that's right. And if it turns out that money was paid for the story, as there seem to be some rumors out there about, then it's even more alarming. But again, the basic problem is these matters are so old, and what we're dealing with, as we lawyers know, is hearsay. I mean, you've got what the Washington Post reports that the women said, but there hasn't been any examination of these women, and in particular, Ms. Korfman. So we really don't know the facts, and it's horrific that control of the Senate could be close to shifting based on this essentially unreliable account.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. How do you compare this 39-year-old allegation to some of what, from a legal perspective, you're seeing coming out of the entertainment industry and other business enterprises? But let's focus on the thing people have been following, which is Harvey Weinstein and this Louis C.K.
Well, that's an important contrast to raise. I don't know much about the Louis C.K. matter, but in the case of Harvey Weinstein's, you have repeated conduct following a pattern that goes right up into the present. And what Roy Moore is accused of doing, apparently, even in these accounts, happened only once. And if he really was a sexual predator, you would expect it to happen repeatedly. There seems to be no evidence of that. So what you've got is a clear case, I think, of horrific abuse in Weinstein's case, and an extremely questionable one in Roy Moore's.
Well, in the case of Louis C.K., I guess he exposed himself to various women and pleasured himself in front of various women. And many of them have come forward, and he admitted it. He basically said, yeah. And his Professor, you have to look at his statement admitting the behavior, because I think the statement admitting the behavior also speaks to the utter depravity of the individual. I'm not going to repeat what he wrote in the statement, but there are at least two lines that are so gross, and how he refers to his own anatomy, that it's just, again, it's a bad deal when, again, I feel like it's back in 1998 or 9 when you have to grab the remote control when your kids are watching TV in the morning. Like, I have the news on, and my kids look up at the screen, they hear sexual events. I have to grab the remote and turn it off. I can't even watch the news in my own kitchen. Can't watch it.
No, and the contrast that you draw again is a very powerful one, because there are certainly people who would say that Ray Moore's record as a West Point graduate and as someone who's been married for more than 3 decades doesn't fit the pattern that you described for Louis C.K.
And don't you find it annoying that people keep saying pedophilia when, even if this is true, it's not pedophilia? I mean, that drives me crazy.
No, there's a rush to judgment and a herd mentality out there. And it's that extraordinary power that suggests there ought to be some responsibility, which we don't seem to have in the media these days.
Professor, great to talk to you. Thanks so much. Professor Stephen Presser, about the rush to judgment in this case, and distinguishing this from what we've heard in the repeated allegations against Harvey Weinstein. We'll take a break. 855-40-LAURA. A lot more to get to. Trump's approval rating, where is that now? And believe it or not, House Republicans, their numbers are still in the toilet. We'll tell you just how bad that is. Don't go away.
Got to admit, it's getting better, a little better all the time.
The daily tracking poll, according to Rasmussen, showing 46% of likely U.S. voters approving of President Trump's job performance, 53% disapprove. The latest figures include 30% who strongly approve of the way the president is performing and 44% who strongly disapprove. So it's better than what the media want you to believe. It's not exactly where he wants it. He wants it to be higher than that. And I think it will be higher than that if he keeps focused on the most important issues of the day. So that's something for you to keep in mind. Also, House Republicans. This is why, they should just listen to what Trump says to do and just do it because he's more popular than they are. House Republicans are actually down to looks like it's 38%. No, it's can you give me the actual numbers, please? The House Republicans still have a much lower approval rating. The last time I checked, it was about 22%, but there are new numbers out that are going to be handed to me any moment. So House Republicans need to get their numbers up, and they get their numbers up and get into a better place for 2018 if, in fact, they get legislation passed that makes the lives of average Americans better. That means a good tax reform package. That means when you conference with the Senate, make sure the tax reform is simple, easy to understand, and has broad-based benefits. It means the people who pay most in taxes should, in fact, get also a tax cut. It doesn't mean they should get the lion's share, but the idea that anyone should pay more taxes when you have a House and a Senate in Republican hands with a president who's Republican is abysmal. It means that they should not give away DACA amnesty for a promise of enforcement. They should get something like chain migration, ending chain migration in exchange for any DACA amnesty. That means the Dreamer amnesty. If they are perceived to be rolled on the issue of amnesty, in my mind, they're going to hurt themselves terribly in 2018. By the way, the Alabama issue, more news on that. Nearly 40% of Alabama evangelicals said in a new poll that they are now more likely to vote for Roy Moore following allegations of the sexual misconduct. 37%, according to JMC Analytics, of evangelicals surveyed that the allegations make them more likely to vote for him. Just 28% said the allegations made them less likely to vote for Moore, and 34% said the allegations made no difference in their decision. But according to polls in Alabama, Doug Jones, again, who favors and is for infanticide, is for infanticide. Doug Jones is actually, tied with Roy Moore in some polls.
This is Bannonism on trial. Bannon is trying to create this sense of, frankly, a white, aggrieved identity group that's under siege by everybody. And this is that in its worst form. So you're not supposed to vote as a father. You're not supposed to vote as a brother. You're not supposed to vote as a woman. You're supposed to vote as a member of this identity group against the world. And if that works, that is very, very bad for the Republican Party. It's very, very bad for the country.
Let me get this straight. Van Jones, CNN, is claiming that Republicans are voting on the basis of identity groups. Is that what he's saying? Can't even follow him. Did he turn green when he said that? Because that's what Democrats do. Their stock and trade is identity politics. That is what they do. That's what they've always done. So be very clear about this. 855-40-LAURA. We'll take a break. Do not touch that dial. Oh, wait. We have. Let's go to John. We just lost John. All right. What we're going to do is reset. Graham Allison's going to be with us, political scientist and professor at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And also we're going to talk to Rob Jones, who's a double amputee Marine Corps veteran. We'll find out what he was doing this past weekend. And I hope you all were able to celebrate Veterans Day and tell one of your family members or friends who served in the armed forces how much you appreciate their service. We certainly did. And the Ingraham Angle tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. We have a fantastic show on tap. We're going to be handling all these issues. Roy Moore, the impending DACA amnesty push. We're going to be talking about the pressure on Congress to deliver this tax reform before 2018. As you know, they're getting ready to take another break, another Thanksgiving break, another long week off, getting ready for Christmas break. They get more time away from Washington. Oh, I know it's not real vacation. They're working hard at home. I think they should stay in session until they get all this stuff done. What do you think? 855-40-LAURA.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
From Russia with love, I fly to you.
Could you once and for all, definitively, sir, yes or no, say whether or not you believe that President Putin and or Russia interfered in the election?
What I said, I'm surprised that there's any conflict on this. What I said there is that I believe he believes that, and that's very important for somebody to believe. I believe that he feels that he and Russia did not meddle in the election. As to whether I believe it or not, I'm with our agencies, especially as currently constituted with their leadership.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. The media, of course, swirling around any sense from this administration that they're willing to give Russia any credibility in what they're claiming about not interfering in the election cycle. Donald Trump spoke about this on Air Force One in an off-camera briefing, and it was not on camera originally, but basically said, Putin came up to him and said, I didn't do this. And Donald Trump essentially said, I believe him. He really seems like he's really annoyed by these charges and wants to have a better relationship with the United States. The problem is Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, and all these former CIA directors and intelligence chiefs are all very adamant that Russia, in fact, did try to meddle in the election. We have the Facebook bot issue. We have the fake ads on Facebook from Russian sources. Obviously, their attempts to get into and hack into email systems and so forth, as we've seen with other countries. But specifically with this election cycle, I don't think it's wise for Trump to go there. And so he had to back down from that and say, after Mike Pompeo comes out and says, we stand by our report that we did, our intelligence finding that Russia did indeed try to sway the election. Now, they were not successful in swaying the election or changing the results of the election. The election is what the election was, but yeah, they were trying to. And so the president you just heard there backing away from that. But I find it so fascinating that the Democrats now want us to have no relationship with Russia. All they were doing in the Obama administration was falling all over themselves, trying to have a reset with Russia. John Kerry was running over to Moscow all the way back into the 2016 election cycle. Back, I think it was August, John Kerry went over there, September. Kept trying to convince them. I'll go back and pull up the articles, but he was desperate to change the dynamic, our relationship with Russia, because why? We needed Russian cooperation in the hunt for ISIS, to shut down and defeat ISIS. If we can share intelligence with Russia on common goals, then that's all, always, really important to do. And yeah, Kerry met Putin way back in, July 2016. And then in the spring he was there as well. He was like shuttle diplomacy, desperately going back and forth to Russia. Now we can't even go to Russia, apparently. Do you think that's smart for us to have such strained relations with Russia? I think you can call them to the mat on their attempt to muck around with the election cycle, which frankly I wish Donald Trump had done. And also say, look, we want to work with you, but this stuff ends now. You're not doing this anymore. And it doesn't help the country, hurts us, and it certainly doesn't help me. If we can work together on certain things, great. If we can't, we're not going to work on them. But let me be clear to you that I stand for the American interest. I know you stand for the Russian interest. Sometimes we're going to really disagree vehemently, but we won't put up with this. I think that would have been a better way for him to go. left is obsessing over that Russian dossier still, and percolating on left-wing websites is this idea that, well, the reason Trump never really takes on Putin is because he's worried about that dossier and something in the dossier is true. And he's worried they have something else. I think that's ridiculous. I personally think we should be talking to most countries, especially great powers. China, Russia, our neighbors to the north and south. We have to have an open dialogue. It doesn't mean we agree with them or we're not even going to be adversaries on key issues. We are going to be. Look at what Trump did with China. Look at what China has done to us in the form of stealing our intellectual property and the way they hacked into the Office of Personnel Management and took 50 million background check files. Took them. Think about what they've done to us. The massive trade deficit, massive rampant subsidies that China has engaged in of its major industries, contrary to the WTO rules and regulations, World Trade Organization, manipulating their currency, what they've done to Christians in China. And yet we go over there and we meet with them and we try to get them to help us on North Korea, and we even submit ourselves to all their over-the-top pageantry. But it's not like you're not going to talk to China. You don't think China's trying to influence America? Go to any major university in the United States and you'll see how much money China is pouring into Chinese studies departments, literature, buying up commercial and residential real estate. It's just obscene. So China good, Russia bad. You figure that China's building islands in the South China Sea. China's taking a very aggressive stance on military weaponry, space weaponry. China good, Russia bad. Really? That makes no sense. It's crazy. The president has nominated Alex Azar II. Alex Azar was the former George W. Bush Deputy Secretary of HHS and General Counsel of HHS. LifeZette has a piece up. He is a dear friend of yours truly. He went to Dartmouth College, went to Yale Law School, top of his class at both institutions, clerk for Justice Scalia, previously had been a top executive at Lilly, and so the big pharma angle I'm sure will be thrown in his face, but he is brilliant, conservative, stalwart, wonderful person, and just they are lucky to have him. You know why Alex is a great choice for this HHS? He knows the swamp big time. He knows it from the bureaucratic perspective. So these people at HHS can't burrow their way into these sub-departments and pull the wool over the eyes of the secretary. No, he knows where all those – as general counsel, let me tell you something. When you're general counsel of a massive bureaucracy like that and then deputy secretary, the deputy secretary does the nuts and bolts day-to-day administration of the department. You can't have all these cabinet secretaries who've never worked in government. It does not work. You have to have people who can manage on a chief executive level, as he has. He was president of Eli Lilly, one of the presidents. They have a number of presidents, president of North America. But also dealing with that bureaucracy of Lilly and then dealing with the bureaucracy in Washington. That is a rare combination. And a clerk for Scalia. Hello? I mean, you can't get any smarter than that. Scalia only hired the best of the best. So 855-40-LAURA. We'll get into more of that. Well, remember another American president who tried to do outreach to Russia, calling them a strategic adversary, a military adversary for sure, which was Reagan and the Soviet Union. And, trust but verify. That was the Reagan catchphrase. It got a lot accomplished, and it led to the demise of the Soviet Union. The best way to keep the Soviets in line, in my mind, is not to have nothing to do with them. Certainly not to believe everything they say to us. I mean, a former KGB guy, of course he's going to say he had nothing to do with the election cycle. And maybe in Putin's mind, he didn't. Maybe in Putin's mind, he's like, look, we tried, but we didn't. So who knows what is going on in his mind. But Putin is he's trained and schooled in psyops and this type of one-on-one strategy. The Russians are very unhappy about this perceived snub of Putin as well. The state media is not happy. This is a new piece that just came out in Bloomberg. Russian lawmakers and analysts bemoaned Donald Trump's failure to hold a formal meeting with the Kremlin counterpart at the APEC summit in Vietnam, as state media sought to put a brave face on the perceived snub. The U.S. political establishment is ready to do anything to kill even the slightest possibility of a normalization of Russian-American ties, said Franz Klincevic, deputy head of the Defense and Security Committee in Russia's upper house of parliament. We're taking a total step backward. This has been my concern from the very beginning with this Russian-Trump ongoing cloud that hanging over this administration, is that when we need to speak to Russia, we're not speaking to them. I think that's really unfortunate. I think we should be speaking with everybody and working with everyone we can when we can, with clear eyes, knowing that no, they're not gonna have our best interests at heart, but we may have common goals on certain points, like ISIS. Maybe even in Syria, we could work out something with the Russians. Maybe as a hedge against China. You see, what I don't think is smart is for us to totally give the cold shoulder to Russia, sending them flying into the arms of President Xi in China. The Russo-Sino alliance is not going to be good for us. They're already doing joint military exercises. 2 communist countries up against the United States of America. I don't think that's helpful. I think we want a hedge against China. Who's going to give us a hedge against China? What other country? Well, we're going to obviously work with our traditional allies, but Russia gives us a hedge against China. But now I think the administration is so spooked about anything with Russia, the second Trump says anything about, well, I kind of take him at his word. Again, which he shouldn't have said, but now I think Trump's now in this position where he's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't have an open dialogue with Russia, it hurts American interests. And it gets the Russians' backs up. See, they're very proud people. And they fancy themselves still a great world power. And they are one of the big world powers. They're not as big as they once were, but they're still big. Their economy is not where it needs to be, and they're struggling in certain areas, especially with the glut of natural gas in the United States. But, they're still Mother Russia to them. So when they're snubbed, they're going to look for love in all the wrong places. This is what I'm saying. I don't like this at all. I think it's bad geopolitics. 855-40-LAURA. We have a lot more to get to. We'll take your calls. A lot of people calling in from Bama about Roy Moore. And there are some in Congress on a separate issue who believe that a special counsel is needed to investigate both Hillary Clinton and Jim Comey and the way they've conducted themselves in this email investigation that was suddenly dropped by Comey and what was behind all of that. And Jim Jordan's pushing for that on Capitol Hill. So we'll bring you the latest on that. I think, look, if you're going to have a special counsel for Russian collusion, you should absolutely have a special counsel for Hillary shenanigans. And they'll say it's all political. Well, we say what you're doing is political. But if you're a Republican on Capitol Hill and you see your president getting beaten up morning, noon, and night over the fantasy of Russian collusion, then you better start giving some pressure on the other side. Put some pressure on the other side. Because they want to play politics on all this, then they can play politics. But the Republicans can do the same thing. Anyway, Alex Azar nominated as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services. Boy, do we need someone good in there, given this nightmare unfolding with Obamacare. And premiums, if you're looking at the Obamacare exchange that's open enrollment right now, tell me what you're finding. I was looking around the open enrollment yesterday, looking at the DC exchange and looking at the numbers are going up, and up. The premiums are going up. It's not good. And yet people, they want health care, but the free market is the best way to do that. We can't as bureaucracy. And by the way, there's a lot the Secretary of HHS can do just with his discretionary powers to change the balance in a good way on Obamacare. And I know Alex knows that. And he'll be doing that as HHS Secretary. He's going to get confirmed. But he will be pressing on that issue. We'll take a break. A lot more to get to on your healthy radio addiction. Coming up, Graham Allison on Trump's warm reception in China, what that could mean as he takes on China, as he made his next stop in Vietnam on the trade issue. And will we make any progress on this North Korean threat? The Japanese are still very, very worried. Don't go away.
off to get you on a slow boat to China.
The President of the United States goes to Asia, takes the United States out of the principal dynamic in that part of the world, which is a global regional trading agreement. 40% of the world's economy should be there. We've taken ourselves out. Who's benefiting? China. China is the strategic beneficiary of this latest bout of American isolationism and protectionism. That is what historians are going to write.
This is coming from someone, Richard Haas, who a few years ago said that Russia was a regional power, and Russia had no real juice anymore. Okay. So Richard Haas believes that we should only enter into these massive trade agreements, multiple countries, where America always gets the short end of the stick. So that's his view. If it's called the Global Trade Agreement, Richard Haas thinks we should trade our sovereignty away to be in it, our independence. So when we can have our intellectual property summarily and consistently stolen, we're going to have very little recourse to turn that around, and as we had in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. If we decide we have to put countervailing tariffs on products coming into the United States because other countries are cheating under the terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, if we had been a member, we would not have been able to put countervailing duties, countervailing tariffs. If we did, we would be subjected to tens of billions of dollars of fines. So these global trade fanatics are not happy unless America's independence is being sapped away by some international trade bureaucracy. I believe that America should trade. Bilateral trade is always better. When you do bilateral agreements, you can see what the other side is doing. Versus you got Vietnam, you got Japan, you got Australia, all these countries all around the world. Why do we have to have a massive global trade agreement? Have bilateral agreements that we can police. And if it turns out that they're not abiding by our agreement, then we can slap duties on products coming into the United States. I think Trump is exactly right on this. And I thank God every day that Donald Trump is president of the United States, if only for the Supreme Court and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. If only those two things, we're not part of TPP, we're not in that stupid climate change deal, and we have the Supreme Court. And we probably will have 2 more nominations coming up, I believe, at least one. Next year. And so you got another nomination, you got a really important footprint on the U.S. court system. Let's go to Mitch in Alabama, line 1. I'm hearing a lot of what Mitch is saying on this Roy Moore issue. Go ahead.
Yes, Laura, I'm in Mobile, Alabama area, which is all the way to the coast, and I've never seen so many Democratic yard signs for Doug Jones. I see very few Roy Moores. And I've been following politics for about 60 years now down here, so I don't know what that means, if anything.
So Alabamans will elect, you think, a man who's in favor of partial birth abortion, his views on a variety of social issues. He's a far-left Democrat. I mean, if that's the case, and I don't know what to say about the people of Alabama. I love them dearly. Maybe they're just so demoralized about the race. They're so demoralized about the accusations against Roy Moore. You guys are going to have to determine it for yourselves. But if I were you, I wouldn't let the Washington Post determine the outcome of my election. They don't have the best interests of Alabamans at heart.
Do you want to be great at reading body language, developing persuasion and influence, as well as master rapport and social interaction? What if I told you that you would learn from top performers like NBA superstar Shaquille O'Neal, former CIA director Michael Hayden, and brilliant thinkers like Dirty Jobs Mike Rowe? Take a minute right now and subscribe to the Art of Charm podcast with me, Jordan Harbinger, and you'll hear how I pull out the secret psychology, life experience, and wisdom that can only be learned from them. You'll hear Shaq talk about how to manage your career and how to know who to trust when everyone's out to get something from you. You'll discover how to think critically from Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and even how Tony Hawk's life as a skateboard icon will influence how you think about your career and relationships in a whole new way. This show is for you if you want to outcompete, outperform, and outthink everyone around you, and it's the only place you'll get practical, applicable strategies from every single episode. Since you're all about learning from the absolute best, download and subscribe for free right now and upgrade your brain 4 times a week at podcastone.com or in the Podcast One app.
Tough enough
I mean, this guy now for about 2 years has been bashing China. He went to China, he backed down, he buckled down. That was an embarrassment. I was laughing when I saw that, but I was sad on the inside.
The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to violations, cheating, or economic aggression. Those days are over.
That was that character from San Francisco, Arash Aramesh, who fancies himself a national security expert, alleging that, well, Donald Trump has just been totally bought by the Chinese, by the pageantry and the pomp, and that he was just sucking up to President Xi, and it was embarrassing. Embarrassing. Well, of course, the president goes to Vietnam, and that speech that ran about 3:15 in the morning on Friday morning was just a tour de force. If you believe in aggressive policing of trade deals, if you believe in bilateral trade deals, American manufacturing, the robust protection of American goods and services from intellectual property theft, then you would have loved what he said in Vietnam, but kind of the opposite of sucking up to the Chinese. Joining us now is Graham Allison. I'm delighted he's with us. He's a political scientist and a professor at the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, author of the great book Destined for War. He joins us now. Graham, great to talk to you. How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
So give me your sense on, we'll talk first about Trump on the China question, specifically on the trade issue. After the pageantry of his trip, he goes to the Forbidden City, and no president, I guess, had gone there before. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct. I think that's right. Basically, it's hard to tell from the pictures and words that we've seen so far how much business President Trump succeeded in doing. I think he clearly, the top of his agenda, and I think correctly, is North Korea, which is in the months immediately ahead going to acquire an ability to strike the American West Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles, with a nuclear warhead, unless it's interrupted. And Trump has made it clear he's going to do everything in his power to prevent that happening, up to and including attacking North Korea, even though he knows that's extremely dangerous. So the hand he inherited was a lousy hand. I think that's exactly right. There were not many options. He's targeted China, and specifically Xi Jinping, in his hope to persuade Xi Jinping that Xi should stop Kim Jong-un from testing further ICBMs and therefore acquiring this capability. And in order to persuade him, he's threatened him, he's flattered him, he's feasted him and feted him at Mar-a-Lago. He's respected him. So exactly what's going on here, you can see the actions, you can see the words, but obviously the business is being done in private, and I think we're going to see in the weeks and months ahead either one of two things. Either Trump's going to succeed, and Xi is going to pull the string or squeeze basically the oil lifeline to North Korea and stop Kim Jong-un right now before he conducts further ICBM tests. That's option one. Or option two, he will fail in this very, very ambitious and difficult effort.
Well, I think this is the way I look at it.
If he fails, then we'll see what happens.
This is the way I look at it, Professor. We've tried a lot of things with China. We brought him into the WTO with great fanfare. We assented to that. We were told by Alan Greenspan and President Clinton that this was going to be a new step forward. There was going to be this great new era of opening up China's markets to trade, and America was going to benefit greatly. And what happened was America fell further and further behind. The trade deficit grew every year. It's going to grow this year. Last year it was $347 billion. This year it'll be about $360 billion. And China has used that money to do a variety of things. They've built up their space weaponry. They are unveiling supersonic jets, new Magic Island dredging machines that I can't believe I'm even saying that on radio because it sounds so boring. But these are important pieces of technology that tell us where China's ambitions lie. and their 2025 agenda, which is the Made in China 2025 initiative. They aim to capture every major part of manufacturing and production in the world, and that's ambitious. But they put out their markers, and the question is, what is America's future going to be if China does become the greatest military power in the world? They already have the largest standing army. So what is our position going to be? Are we going to hold China accountable, or are we just going to kind of sit by and cheer on the fact that a communist nation is surpassing our own?
I think all the things you said are correct, and I think that basically this is a problem that's got 4 or 5 different prongs. There's first the substructure, which is the growth of China's economy relative to the U.S. Most people don't get it, but actually China today has a larger economy, larger than the U.S., measured by what both the CIA and the IMF think is the best yardstick, purchasing power parity. So that's already happened. And that happened, as you say, in large part because the U.S. opened their markets to China and did not insist on terms that would have been better for us. Trump's eager to try to change that. Secondly, China aspires to be a great power. I mean, China is serious about displacing the U.S. as the predominant power in Asia in the foreseeable future, and it's on the track to do so. So that's the second problem. A third problem, and the one that Trump has focused on as the most urgent, is a North Korea, which is separate from China, which actually Xi Jinping, he calls this Kim Jong-un little fatty. He has no sympathy for him. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, this little fatty is about to get the ability to strike San Francisco with a nuclear weapon. Well, that's crazy. So Trump has subordinated the other areas of the competition with China for the moment, trying to persuade Xi to squeeze this lifeline and stop Kim Jong-un before he does this. Because if Kim Jong-un conducts this next series of tests, either Trump is going to attack him, and if he attacks him, we're going to probably have a war in the Korean Peninsula. And if we have a war in the Korean Peninsula, could even become a war with China.
Yep.
And everybody looks and says, yikes, we can't do that. So that's what he's trying to persuade him. You got to stop this guy. As he told him, you're big, you're strong, you have the power over this guy, just do it. That's what he told him. Now we're going to see what happens.
Well, what about this scenario that I've had this painted for me, this picture painted for me? Professor Allison, we're talking to Graham Allison, who's an expert in all things Asia and geopolitical. What if China comes forward and says, look, this is how it's going to have to be for us. We need to be in charge of North Korea. Like, we'll take on North Korea. But in the pledge from you has to be Japan will never become a nuclear power. We will not allow nuclear capability of any of our neighbors in the region. And basically, this area is run by us now. I mean, that's a stark question, but that could be what we're facing, is it not?
You bet. And for Americans, we don't like to allow that we might have to give up something in order to get something. But in this world, mostly you got to give in order to get. So I think if she offered Trump that deal and said, look, what I can tell you for sure is we will denuclearize North Korea. We'll take it over, we'll put in our own puppet regime, and we'll manage the affairs there. But you got to guarantee us no nukes in South Korea and no nukes in Japan. I think Trump would accept that deal. And even though I would find it very uncomfortable, I would support him.
Yeah, when I talked to President Trump about this 2 weeks ago for the Ingraham angle, he looked at me and he said, we have this thing called thermonuclear war possibility. Because I said, are you going to push them on China? Are you going to push them on trade? Are you going to push them on trade? And look, they're going to do what they're going to do on the trade enforcement side, on the 301 investigation they're doing. But he just stopped everything and said thermonuclear war. Like, that's clearly what's on his mind. And it's a lot more, it's a lot closer than people believe, this North Korea threat against the west coast of the United States. It's a lot closer than people understand.
You bet. And as you've kept emphasizing, and I think this is a very important point, Trump gets it that in order to prevent war with China, however much we're going to fight China on all the other fronts, and we should. So it doesn't require us giving them a pass on bad economic behavior, cheating on trade deals, stealing intellectual property. We don't have to go and pass on anything, but we have to recognize that we need to have good enough relations with China to avoid a thermonuclear war.
And before we let you go, just very briefly, I was saying earlier that I believe it's very perilous for the Trump administration to freeze out Russia because of domestic political concerns here in the United States. It's in a freeze-out mode. I mean, you're not going to meet with Putin. Everyone's on, walking on eggshells with Russia, and that means that we do not even have a trust but verify possibility with Russia. I'm just using that as a way of treating them. Yep. They're not our friend. They're our adversary in many ways, but we can work with them on some things. But apparently, we're not even talking to them. We're not even having any real conversations.
This reminds us of the craziness of American politics. So on the one hand, I think President Trump has a kind of it's odd the extent to which he wants to give Putin a pass. It raises more questions than it answers, on the one hand. On the other hand, when he says we have to have a cooperative relationship with Russia sufficient to avoid the nuclear war, of which the two of us would be the first victims, he's just saying what Ronald Reagan said. And Ronald Reagan was exactly right. Reagan would say, often conservative Republicans would get after Reagan for wanting to talk to the Soviets or to make deals with them, even to deals in which we had to agree not to do some things we wanted to do with our arms in order to get them to do things, in order to get them stop doing things we didn't want them to do. And Reagan would say, look, a nuclear war with the Soviet Union cannot be won, simply can't be won. Therefore, it must never be fought. So we have to be talking to them. We have to be trying to avoid misunderstandings. We have to be, in all of these, never reach an agreement that you can't verify what they've agreed to do, because they'll lie, steal, and cheat if they can get away with it. But nonetheless, that doesn't prevent us finding ways to discuss and to cooperate to the minimum required to avoid war. But as you say, the current relationship, largely, I think, fueled by the fuss in Washington over Russia's meddling in the election, has basically frozen this situation in a way that in some respects is as dangerous as it ever was in the Cold War.
Right, this is what I'm saying. How ironic is this, that everyone thought, well, Trump's going to have this, he's going to do some weird deals with Russia to benefit himself. Now we're not even talking to Russia. And the United States is being harmed. Our geopolitical concerns, in my view, are being harmed in Syria against ISIS, and intelligence sharing to be a hedge against China. Russo-Sino alliance is not something I want to see grow stronger. Personally, I've never wanted that. I think it's horrible for this country. And I know maybe this doesn't rate in radio or television, but I think I'm going to talk about this tonight on TV, Graham, because I think this is so important. And everybody's in their little tunnel on Russia-China. Tunnel vision. And it drives me crazy. I
agree 100%. I think that what I say about Russia is what I said about the Soviet Union. They are I would put it provocatively, our insufferable but inseparable Siamese twin. So whatever they do that leads me to want to kill them, and however much I deserve to strangle the bastards, when I think about it, I think, wait a minute, the moment after I've done that, I've just committed suicide. So I have to find a way to live with Russia.
Yeah, we'll work with them, and wherever we can. And if we can't, we can't. But we got to figure out a better situation than freezing them out, because that's not working. 855-40-LAURA. Graham Allison, fantastic segment. We really appreciate your voice on this. Author of Destined for War. When we come back, surveillance cameras everywhere in the United States. Traffic stops, in elevators, in entranceways to stores. Everywhere you're being filmed. Guess who makes those cameras? When we come back. Surveillance cameras made by China are hanging all over the United States. The company is 42% owned by the Chinese government. And it sold devices that monitor the U.S. Army base, Memphis streets, sparking concerns about cybersecurity. You think? And we're worried about Russia? We're actually helping China spy on us. But Putin, we're worried about. See, poor old Putin trying to get Trump's attention when they were walking in the Philippines. They're all walking in the Philippines. And Putin's like this little guy, and he's trying to say, hey, look at me. And Trump's kind of just keeps walking and looks at him every now and then. But Putin's mad about this being snubbed, though, I can tell you. That's not going to be good. Do you have a problem with this? That the U.S. military buys anything, I mean anything, made in part in China. The U.S. military should buy American-made goods, especially surveillance-type goods that would assist in a Chinese communist government spying on us. 855-40-LAURA. A lot more to get to.
Thanks for listening to the Laura Ingraham Show podcast. Download new episodes every week at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Heather Dubrow.
And I'm Dr. Terry Dubrow.
Every Friday, check out my podcast, Heather Dubrow's World.
We also have the Dr. and Mrs. Guinea Pig Show every Tuesday.
So don't forget, iTunes and Podcast One. Tune in to Dr. and Mrs. Guinea Pig on Tuesdays and Heather Dubrow's World every Friday.